As you know, that got filed with the clerk on January 29th. There is a 7 business day period of time within which challenges can be filed in the circuit court against that ballot title. No ballot title challenges were filed, so that is now a valid ballot measure. We'll be moving forward. Next steps for the board, actually it's not so much the board as the chair. You may recall that the order that you signed approved the form of the ballot title, which is that caption, question, statement thing, 175 word limitation, and the explanatory statement, which is the basically the board's explanation of the measure that goes in the county's voters pamphlet. So those documents were approved along with the map of the district, fairly straightforward. The map, of course, is the county boundaries, but the statute requires that there be a map or a legal description provided, so we're including the map just so everybody's clear. Those were all approved in that board order, but I will be asking the chair to sign off on those final documents. They're basically duplicates of exactly what was in that order. Those are the original submissions that we will file with the clerk, and that's the final steps for that process. So that'll be moving forward. Any questions about the status of that?
I do have a question, Rick. If someone was to protest or appeal that measure, would they be appealing the way that the Board of Commissioners had the explanation worded, something like
That's
that?
exactly
They would have
right.
thought it would have weighed one way or the other.
That's exactly right. The only thing they get to challenge is that ballot title. So they could say the caption didn't accurately reflect the nature of the measure. They could say that the question didn't pose the right issue for the voters, and they could say that statement, that summary, basically was not accurate, that it somehow was prejudicial or was advocating. And so that a judge would make a decision in the circuit court, and that's the end of that conversation. Once the judge made a decision, if there were a ballot title challenge filed, the judge makes a decision, and he or she would determine what the specific language of the ballot title would be.
Oh, they determine. Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the final say. Okay. It's not appealable, and you can understand why, because you got short time frames here to get it on the ballot. So.
Remember, we had something, as I recall, with when we put the
White City?
I think it was White City. I thought it was back when we put the surveyor and such on the ballot. Remember, we had a challenge or something, the judge had to rewrite the title. Don't recall.
Yeah, I actually saw some old materials in the files down there about that. I think that's exactly right, and the judge in that case, actually, there was a ballot title that the DA ended up writing at some point, and it was challenged as well. So, anyway, any questions about that?
Okay.
And I did want to clarify one additional thing. You asked a very good question yesterday, John, about the timing of people who may wish to run for the library district. Well, I want to talk with Chris. She's not around right now. But I looked at the notice that she filed. She had to file a notice of possible candidate elections on January 30. That was before you made a decision about this. But it spoke in terms of a possible election if the library district were referred, a possible election for board members. And what it says is that they can be filed the day the referral is filed, and the filing deadline will be 5 p.m. on March 11th. So they could file as soon as yesterday afternoon after I filed that measure. So the ballot title stuff does not interfere with the candidate election process.
Once it's been verified by the clerk.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. Once the clerk is verified and accepted, yeah.
And March 11th.
Yes, and yeah, at 5 p.m. is what this notice that was printed in the Mail Tribune early in February.
And that's the cutoff date for anyone that's filing for office, I understand.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a commissioner.
Wouldn't matter which
Okay.
elective office it were, I think that is the deadline for everybody. And that's all I had for the general session.
That one's good.
It's not too late, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
See who's running against me.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Rick. Okay, Danny?
Is Doug sick today?
No, remember, he's on vacation.
Okay, so you have a community service award for Paula Buckner from the Boy Scouts of America. Consent calendar is your staff meeting and work session minutes. There are no public hearings. We have an order authorizing a master purchase agreement with Structured Communication Systems. So this is to replace the county phone system. This is something the Budget Committee actually approved in 2011. We budgeted in 2011, we never spread the cost for it, so the departments would be included in their indirect charges this year. But they've been told to budget it since 2011.
Hefty.
We purposely delayed, actually it's not that bad.
Oh, okay.
We purposely delayed this project, if you'll recall, because we had a myriad of projects that came on that were unexpected, like the internal project in the assessor's office, which was a huge software program, and a couple of health and human services. Anyways, in this case, this is exempt from competitive bid by our local contract review board rules. However, the IT department did issue an informal request for information regarding people's interest in it. We got 23 different companies that responded. 7 of those were determined to meet the qualification criteria in the request for information. We interviewed 2 of those 7 based on their submittals, development group and the Structured Communication Systems group. And the review committee selected the Structured Communication System for recommendation for approval. So this contract provides all of the system hardware for the phone system. So the phones themselves, all of the network pieces, everything that goes along integrating it. Remember, this is going to integrate with our Microsoft Office products so that you can get phone messages through email and that kind of stuff. Anyways, the total cost of this is $541,561.
Where is this company from?
I don't know. I figured you guys would ask me that, but tech companies, there were no local tech companies that.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I can find out, but before
You
you approve the contract.
Somebody else asked the questions.
Yeah.
Danny, I have a question. I've heard some rumors that, is the fair going to be part of this or not? I've
No,
heard-
they're part of it.
Okay, because they've said something about, well, we're not part of the new phone system because we don't need any of that.
So here's what happened with the fair, okay? This is the same thing that happens with building expenses with the fair. You know, when you look at the indirect cost sheet, I actually showed you this so you could see it on top of the fair. You go through every department in the county, building expenses are spread through every department except for the fair. When you get to their line item, they're not charging indirect costs, it's actually charged to the general fund. So in this case, their portion of cost for this $541,000 were about $22,000. When they asked 6 months ago or so about that they believed they were going to be charged 30-some thousand, I think is what they said. They were told to budget 30-some thousand in 2011, like every department. They didn't continue to budget it, so they don't have the funds to pay for it. So in their case, what we did was in our central services fiduciary reserve. Okay, so we have central services charges, and then we have central services fiduciary that's essentially reserve against unanticipated charges, which they've paid into. We charge their portion against the central services fiduciary reserve, so they don't get a direct charge. It will go against the portion of reserve that they've contributed to build that central services fiduciary reserve. So they're still paying, they're just not going to get a direct bill.
But their portion, I mean, that reserve, their portion will obviously be reduced by that X amount.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially, the whole reserve will be reduced by that amount. All departments have paid into the reserve. The only way that becomes an issue is if we were gonna take that reserve and redistribute it back out to the departments, but that doesn't happen. We
Okay,
can't
I
constantly.
just want to make sure they're not getting a free ride.
Well, they've paid into that reserve, so, but we're not using everyone else's, the fact that they paid into that reserve to cover their costs, we're doing that for the fair, because they don't have the money to pay for it, and they can't not be part of the system. They're not getting a free ride because they paid into that reserve, but everyone else is, in addition to paying into that reserve, paying for their portion of the phone system, as a direct billing as an indirect cost.
And would the fair board have the ability to say, we don't want to be part of the system, just give us a phone number of 773 something, you know? Yeah, because we only have one person working out there, and they don't need to be part of the system.
Well, they've asked to not be part of the county council system, the audit system. This is a system of indirect cost allocation, so I think you're going down a slippery slope if you want to do that. Technically, they don't, we do charge out by the number of phones that you have, by the number of employees and the total amount of your budget when it comes to something like computers or phones. So if they go down to having no phones, then they won't have a charge, an ongoing charge. This is a capital investment rather than an indirect charge that we're treating like an indirect charge.
Well, and my question, I'm not arguing whether they needed it or not, I'm asking, would the fair board have the ability to say, we don't want that?
They could say, we don't want any phones.
Okay.
But they're gonna have to buy phones then outside of the county system.
Right.
And we know that's much more expensive because we're on a system that receives discounts because we're not taxed as a government agency. We have negotiated rates for long distance calls and local tolls that are only available because we are in mass.
Right.
With a centralized system, so they could do that. The truth is it's going to be more expensive for them to do that.
Do they see their phone bill out there? Do we know what-
Everybody can see their phone bill if they want to. I don't know if they actually look at their phone bills or not, but they can.
Well, I'm thinking probably they think they don't make many calls, and they can probably get away with $65 a month, but I'm guessing if they looked at all the calls they make around the state to other fairs and things like that, it would be considerably more than they think it is. That's what I was wondering. They would look at that.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. This is a one-time charge. They're not charged $22,000 every year. This is to buy the infrastructure that is going to last for another 15 years. So take $22,000 and spread it over 15 years. They're paying $1,000 a year for the system. And they have multiple buildings out there that have. Go to the Mace Center, there's phone systems out there. Go to the Compton Arena, there's phone systems out there. So
Yeah, I'm not arguing with
I'm
what they
not
do.
either.
I'm just saying that I wouldn't be surprised if they said, we don't want to be part of that.
Yeah.
See, if I may interject here, is I think we've made here in this last short period of time, I think we made tremendous strides, when I say we in the fair board, and here with the county itself, in that inculcating that group into the group. So we're acting as a unit. I think we saw that the other day when they made their semi-annual report. And so I would be in favor of squashing that kind of thought process right off the bat. I mean, because that, from my short period here, my understanding, that's always been the problem. They want to do their own thing, and that's what's got them into trouble here or there. And so I think, if that question, if they were to ask me that question, I mean, you're the liaison to it, that's exactly what I'd say. Remember, now we're working as a team. We're a team. We just wrote off a lot of taxpayers' money for your bill. That's team deal. So don't now all of a sudden decide, oh, okay, that's fine being a team when it's for me, but if it's being a team, I have to do something. I don't want to be a part of it. That doesn't work. I would argue that rather.
Yeah, we'll see what they do.
Well, let me tell you. Let me just answer one more part of your question. Any department can choose not to have phones in their department. They determine how many phones they have. So they could have no charge for phones if they don't want to have phones. Now, they have the ability, because they statutorily can enter into contractual agreements without the board's approval, to go out and enter into a contract for phones. And they could say, hey, we don't need any phones. They won't be charged for phones. If they don't have any computers, they're not charged for computers. Departments do that all the time. When Kelly lost 65% of her staff, she needed 65% less of the computers. We didn't leave them down there and charge her for them. They came out of her office, she stopped being charged. So when people add staff and they need a computer, they get charged. And that computer, this is the same thing we've done with the sheriff in terms of, well, I pay so much for Oil change, well, no you don't. When we charge you for depreciation of the vehicle, deferred maintenance, preventative maintenance, I'm sorry. So you're not just being charged for an oil change, you get charged a monthly fee for the total cost of that car and replacing that car. And, you know, essentially, this is the same thing. Not just paying for the phone, they're paying for the whole system of integration with the county. So when someone calls the county up here and wants to talk to the fair, guess what? They can be connected to the fair. You don't tell the front desk, I'm sorry, the fair's not part of the county. They have a different number, but we don't manage that number, so you'll have to look it up in the phone book, or if you want to wait, I'll look it up for you, right? So, but they can choose not to have phones. Because they have that individual contract authority, they can go enter into contracts.
that was my
And that is what has got them in trouble, because they've entered into contracts that, you know, I will say that probably most reasonable people would say were not financially feasible and also legally tenable for the risk that the county bears for them entering into contracts.
Okay, all right.
The next thing we have is the master services agreement with Structured Communications. This is related to the previous agreement, but this provides, the previous agreement is just buying all the stuff. This provides implementation of the phone system as well as the initial training and training materials for all the staff. It's an in-kind contribution for the Bear Creek, I'm sorry. This is for the Bear Creek, I'm sorry. Hello. As part of our Roads and Parks Department, we manage the Greenway system. This is for 2 sections of trail that'll be constructed on the Greenway with OR 62 and a pedestrian crossing off the southbound I-5 on and off North Bedford Energy. You already know about this? Okay. The total cost of the project is $501,000, so the state bicycle and pedestrian program funds the project to $449,500, and then Region 3 is meeting the match of $51,500. So the county has no expense in it. We're just managing the project. We have no direct expense. We do provide staff as an in-kind contribution. Term of the agreement's final signature through October 31st of 2015, and it'll be $501,000.
We've received CMAQ funds, medication area repair qualification funds. How do you
The next one is an intergovernmental agreement with Josephine County. This is for the Executive Order 1207 for us to do their GIS mapping. We had a previous agreement with them that expired June 30th because that was the end of the state grant. When the state grant was renewed, then we had to renew this agreement. This is the one John said before.
Okay, is this the one that Kelly's been talking about?
Yeah.
This is just the Josephine County, so we'll do all the GIS.
Yeah.
So it's a revenue of $24,000.
Okay.
Well, not to exceed. It's not a guarantee. We bill them for the billable hours up to $24,000.
And Danny, the route of that money, that comes from the state and then goes to RV Cog, then goes to Josephine County, then comes to us. Would that be the route?
Yeah, I mean, Josephine County could pay it outside of that. We don't care how Josephine County
Right.
pays it, honestly. They can pay us directly out of their general fund if they want, and then reimburse their general fund. But I would assume that that's probably what they're going to do since they don't carry much of a fund balance. We would probably just pay it and get reimbursed. The next one, this is kind of interesting. It's an order authorizing a contract for services with Butler Kia Incorporated, doing business as Butler Kia. So it's been almost 9 months after we had the motor pool audit that I asked John Bile to look at outsourcing our motor pool functions. In other words, no longer having county employees do it and moving it into the private sector. We did do a request for proposals in November. We had 4 or 5 companies essentially that bid it. And in that was to essentially take over all of fleet maintenance, so preventative maintenance and then all repairs. We would have still had some staff because they wouldn't do purchasing for us. Obviously, there's a conflict of interest for them to do that, but this is essentially work related to taking care of cars. The entire proposal didn't generate a guaranteed significant savings. The base proposal would generate about $100,000 in savings a year, which I'm not going to say is not significant. However, the unknown factor was the charges for repairs that are above preventative maintenance, and we had no control over that. So that $100,000 could easily turn into a couple $100,000 upside down. So we weren't comfortable just outsourcing the whole fleet. So when we reviewed this, we met with audit as well. It's hard to compare apples to apples, just to be blunt. We did get some pushback from some of the departments because right now the way Motor Pool works is Motor Pool comes and gets the car, does all of the handling of the business. If someone's out and about and needs to stop to have something repaired, Motor Pool will do that and, you know, check their tires and do whatever they have to do. We had some pushback from the sheriff's department because they have a lot of equipment in their cars that they don't want to have people that aren't, you know, background checked and dealt with in terms of the county hiring process, getting into their cars and having access to. So we kind of had this friction going on about the issue. Ultimately, what I asked John to do is, based on the bids, when we give a notice of intent to award, we can negotiate. So essentially what we're going to do is create a hybrid of what we're doing. We're going to prioritize part of it to start. And when we went back to Butler, based on their bid, they were the lowest bid, that's why we went to them. They agreed to keep the, you know, so they quoted us a low-end cost on preventative maintenance. You know, we'll do these oil changes and that kind of stuff for this low of a price. But where they made up the difference was any kind of repairs. So they had to go buy a part, they're going to mark them up 10 or 20%, and then they're going to charge you labor plus cost of managing those repairs. And so that's where I'm saying we didn't know, have a good enough. So when we went back to them, they agreed to keep their bid for that low cost on preventative maintenance. And then we said, well, right now, we use 3 or 4 different repair shops to do all of our repairs. What's the best rate you would give us if we brought all of those repairs just to you? In other words, you're the sole provider. So they dropped that rate way down for us. And so they're going to serve as our preferred provider for all preventative maintenance and repair services, and locked in flat repairs and hourly rates for those things, which they're way less than we're currently paying. So we're going to reduce the cost. We're going to start outsourcing part of the work so we can kind of gauge whether or not we're actually going to realize some cost savings. We usually right now probably outsource around $80,000 to $90,000 a year in repairs. This contract, we set a cap of $250,000 for maintenance and repairs. It's a cap, so we only pay if they do the work. We're going to start in the Kia Butler place right across from the sheriff's office. So we're going to start with the preventative maintenance on some of the sheriff's cars because the location is good. They don't have to be brought all the way back into town. And then we'll see how the repairs go. So, I mean, it's a compromise over getting rid of it all, but it's starting down the road of privatizing part of it, hopefully to reduce the cost.
And how do we handle warranty work? Let's say we have a new police car, or a new pickup, and assessors on whatever, and it blows an engine. Do we have to take it back to that dealership and
Yeah, we take it. It's just like anyone else who buys a car.
okay, so that won't go to Butler. That'll go back to the original dealership. Okay.
Yeah, this is, I mean, honestly, the sheriff cars get dinged up all the time. They get, bent tie rods a lot of times. I mean, those are things warranty doesn't cover because of the, manner by which you're driving the vehicle. It's not reasonable wear and tear. So those are the kinds of things that they'll be working on. Honestly, I think probably where we'll save the most money initially with the massive cars that we have is the sheriff's department constitutes about 40% of all of Motor Pool. So they're a huge chunk of this. That's why we're starting with them, and also the convenient location. So we can really kind of get a gauge. But I think we'll save the most money in the preventative maintenance because the cost that they're doing the work for is just phenomenally inexpensive.
I think that's a really good deal.
Yeah, I love it.
We can privatize and save money. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, I realize we're talking about county employees, but still, that's a great use of our taxpayers' money.
Well, Don, now that you brought that up, so I'm assuming that say that probably equals 5 county employees. What happens to those county?
We only have 3 county employees in Motor Pool.
Okay.
So, I mean, essentially we need to get a gauge on it, and we'll adjust the staffing levels as we begin to transition
Okay.
the work. It really, there was actually not a big pushback from the union or the employees in terms of outsourcing it, except for they like to do what they're doing, and they are good at it. I mean, they get a lot of compliments. They really treat the customers they serve well. And the reason why there wasn't a lot of pushback is because the roads department, carries all sorts of vacancies. They weren't gonna be laid off, they would be moving to, because of their bumping rights and vacant positions, they would have moved into vacant positions. It still would have saved us money because those vacant positions we're not spending money on now. They would move into positions and we would stop spending money on the positions they're in. But the problem that I have is, contemplating the risk that's unknown to us right now until we actually get some factual usage of the service and can kind of gauge about where we're going to be. It's kind of the same when we went to outsource, because I asked Byrne to do a outsourcing of our airport security, and we did a bid on that, and we got a reduction in cost from privatizing it. It was $100,000 a year in operating expenses, but, and this is crazy, the TSA would not allow the county to be indemnified from any security violations. So what happens is we're not allowed to train those staff or manage those staff because they're contracted. But if one of those staff leave a gate open, we get a $250,000 fine. So saving $100,000 with the risk of not having the ability to train and direct those staff to get a fine of $250,000 doesn't make any sense. So this is kind of like that, but with regard to the repair costs. So it's moving down that road, though. After a year, we'll have a really good, I think, picture of how well we did with it.
Good job.
Okay,
And next on the
Next, please.
Okay. So next is an order authorizing an increase of a half FTE position in Development Services Department. So let me explain this a little bit, because we had some questions last time you approved the 6 positions in the Sheriff's Department. FTE approval is position control. It's not spending money approval. What happens, for example, when you hired the sheriff's staff is you had a supplemental budget process that included a public hearing where people could come in and comment on the fact that you were hiring, or that you were going to fund the hiring of new positions. So that was an appropriation authority. In other words, we're going to spend more money to hire more people. You gave appropriation authority in the public hearing for the budget. And then later, you gave the position authority, position control authority, by approving the FTE. Oregon budget law requires us to appropriate the dollars and the FTE position control. So we have to do both, but they're kind of separate processes. Most people don't understand that. Just because you give position control doesn't mean we can hire people if we don't have money to do it. Okay? So that's why a lot of times we have positions that we don't fill because we don't have money to fund them. So I'm responsible for managing both of those things to make sure we have authority to hire the position because you've given us the position, and we have the money that supports it. In the Sheriff's Office, we brought in new revenues, somewhere over $1 million a year, and we hired 5 people that cost about $500,000 a year, so we netted an income to the county. That's why we did it. In this case, Kelly's asking to add an FTE with no more appropriation authority. In other words, she doesn't want to spend any more money than you already gave her authority to spend, but she wants to take the money that she had got to spend and spend part of it on an FTE. She's doing that because she underspent in this particular program, which is the building program, her budget. As we project out, she'll probably come in about $170,000 to the good. So she has the money. I'm going to tell you why in a second, not just that she has the money so we should spend it. Last year she came in her building department budget about a little over 80,000 under. Now, last year we didn't ask you to add an FT even though we had the money. This year we have twice the money and she's asking to add half FT. The reason why she's asking to do that is because the applications for building permits has picked up significantly. Usually during the winter, it slows down a little bit, so she was holding off. She would have waited till the next budget cycle to add this. We had a late hit of winter, so all of December and January, there was plenty of building still going on that usually stops. The way that we cover the front counter now, we have 2 building techs that rotate, and in between the times that they're not there, we have an office assistant that comes over and just takes material to triage it for building techs, so that at least there's someone there to meet the public. When those building techs are gone, that office assistant covers the building tech and then her work doesn't get done. When we're getting more work coming in, she's triaging more work and not able to go do what her regular job is. So in fact, there's 2 things going on here. The one thing is the increased workload for the permitting.